Good day, listeners. Welcome to our podcast about the potential of AI. My name is Andreas Hauser, and with me is David Mugridge, an expert in the oil and gas field. Hello, David. How are you doing?
Good morning. Very well, thanks, Andreas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining. We're sitting here at the in Abu Dhabi at the SPE conference, where we're already discussing basically the impact and potential of AI in the oil and gas field. But before we jump into the specific topics, maybe David, can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Like many people in the offshore energy sector, I started out in the military. So I managed to do about 20 years in the military, and then have worked extensively offshore in many forms of the energy sector for the last 15 years. During that time, actually, I've seen the rise of technology, and the oil and gas business has been a fantastic environment to see the rise of technology and how this sort of technology has changed our approach to operations. And really, AI is very much the latest iteration of that, should I say.
So maybe a few more words on your activities here in the Middle East. As I understand, you're quite active here in UAE and Saudi, also the whole region. You have a good understanding of that business in this region, right?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's been my privilege for the last 5 years to work extensively within the GCC region. Predominantly, it's been in Saudi Arabia, but also here in the UAE. Fantastic environment to do business, and over in Qatar as well. So within that sort of geographical region, obviously it's a very oil and gas rich area. Energy is the big earner here, and it dominates the whole economy. But it's been a fantastic opportunity to see how, again, the energy market is changing, and how we need to be really focused on adapting and adopting new technologies as they come out. And I was very encouraged yesterday with the SPE event here, just how receptive people are to the idea of change, and how can we take these new technologies and adapt and move forward in a positive way to actually maximize the potential we have within the industry.
Yeah, I mentioned, and you also, the SPE conference here was really interesting to see also specifically that AI has been already playing an integral role actually of digital transformation over the last 10, 15 years actually. But now with the, let's say, emergence of Gen AI, this brings this topic AI on the next level. Maybe one more on this quality topic, right? I mean, we are in the Middle East. Oil and gas is a very robust kind of industry, and quality plays a key role. Maybe just your thoughts on this, specifically this region and that industry. Do you see that they can maybe take over a leading role in this AI quality space? I mean, maybe to add on, we've heard yesterday that UAE, but also Saudi and other countries here are quite forward-looking. Big investments are going into that areas. And I also understand they want to play a leading role in the application, specifically in that sector. But how do you look at it from regarding the quality of AI systems? Do you also see that they can potentially play a leading role in that space?
Absolutely. I think if we look at the viewpoint and the importance of oil and gas to this region, that the countries here are firmly of the opinion that they want this industry to be sustainable, they want it to be safe, and they want to be able to manage the consequences of their decision. Now, they're very forward-looking. The Saudi authorities have announced a huge budget for becoming a leading power in the rollout of AI. But also, I mean, the appetite here is not for this to become a quandary. This is actually for this industry to be even more sustainable and safe, so that we can transition from heavy dependence on oil and gas to a more mixed energy provision. And you'll see that across the region with the rollout of wind farms, solar panels, etc. Nuclear power was talked about here in the UAE, that they see oil and gas as part of the energy mix, but they want that contribution to the energy mix to be safe and sustainable. And therefore, in this modern era, the use of AI is a fantastic device to bring about a safer industry.
Can you elaborate a bit more on how is risk being considered in this sector from a traditional perspective?
The traditional approach to risk management has seen two schools of thought really grow up. There is the one that is practiced, which is as low as reasonably practical, a lot. And then there is another school which is aiming to zero risk. Now, obviously, in high reliability organizations and industries like oil and gas, construction, maritime, aviation, etc., we're always striving to bring the risk down, to make it acceptable. But a lot of these industries are actually by nature quite hazardous. So the potential for there to be an incident, accident or an event is quite high. So really, I mean, just to reiterate, two schools of thought. One where we try to aim it to get it as low as reasonably practical, and that makes it more cost effective. But when striving for absolutely zero risk, that's when in industries like oil and gas that we have to expend an awful lot of money, time and training in order to ensure that our safety culture is truly effective and we do not have risk of incidents or accidents. Now, that world is changing with AI, just like it changed with digitalization, just like it changed through various cycles of the industrial age. And now with AI, we see that within this industry, it's not where people want to replace people with a computer. It's actually to enhance the ability of the people who work in the industry to do more with their time and to be safer. So really, AI is coming in as a fantastic complement to an existing approach and strategy towards risk management, which aims to keep this industry safe. I was really taken with the fact that people see the positive benefits of AI and how it can help us actually identify risks that we may not have considered, or force us to reappraise what we're doing operationally. And therefore, AI can be a fantastic tool in managing risk within these high risk industries like oil and gas.
Yeah, it's coming back maybe to this risk topic, what you also mentioned, right? The risk management. I mean, oil and gas obviously has a very strong focus on risk management. I mean, any let's say a potential incident can cause huge catastrophical consequences potentially, right? So the risk is always on the mind, what I see in the oil and gas, not only upstream, but also in the downstream area, right? So, I mean, when I think about this, then if risk has been always on the top agenda, right, isn't it then also maybe even a bit easier for the oil and gas industry to look at the risk management for AI systems as a clear enabler so that they can adopt these technologies faster?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I will say is that oil and gas, like many high reliability sectors, has had its catastrophe-related incidents. Deepwater Horizon, Hyper Ultra. But just like, say, aviation with the Tenerife aircraft, it is the appetite to learn and to extract lessons from those terrible events that make the industry so receptive to change in the way that it does its business, its appetite for risk. And it also makes it that much more hungry to adopt the benefits that proper, regulated, tested and accredited AI can bring. Nobody wants to employ an AI system in a high reliability organization that is not proven to work, or that could potentially increase the likelihood of risk. So it's very focused on using AI to drive the risk down in a measured manner, as opposed to just employing AI willy-nilly so that we speed up. The oil and gas business, just like aviation, like maritime, like nuclear power, is all about measuring risk so that you can have predictable operational performance. And you can improve your operational performance with, I would say, wise, sagacious employment of these new technologies.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Also referencing yesterday's conference, that the impact is on CAPEX, it's on OPEX, obviously, right? Efficiency, productivity gains. But there was also, and I think you brought that up, a comment on HSE, right? The safety aspect of it. So also using AI to improve the safety of these operations. Maybe before we further elaborate then on the risks AI brings actually in addition to it, maybe can you also share some thoughts about using AI to improve the safety of particular operations?
Well, I'll just lay my comments out on the table, Andreas. That I'm actually a big fan of AI. I think that within the industry, it has the ability to be a game changer for us, because we shouldn't forget that, like many high reliability organizations, oil and gas suffers from human error. 75% of our incidents, accidents, fatalities, and injuries are caused through human error. And yet, what I find quite remarkable is that we are seemingly afraid of artificial intelligence because of what it could potentially do to our industry. Yet, actually, I see it as if it can help us as humans reduce the risks of us causing incidents or accidents, then it's a fantastic tool and device for us to use.
Absolutely. And when we think about now further, basically, yesterday we learned that adoption of AI is at an early stage in that industry, as in many other industries as well. Basically, agentic AI is being used more and more, where you hand over decisions basically to AI systems. They become more autonomous, and obviously the risk then of to control these systems becomes much higher. So how do you see organizations should tackle that? I mean, is it the governance of AI? How to frame ultimately how to deal with that new technology from a governance perspective, organizational perspective, process perspective, or is it more a technical approach? That you try to test these systems and to control them in that regard. So maybe just some thoughts how organizations should basically in the oil and gas sector address those aspects.
Well, I'm going to be slightly controversial here and say all of the above. That we shouldn't delegate or abdicate our responsibilities when making a decision to AI. What we should do is delegate to AI part of the process that then better informs us as the human decision maker to affect a safe outcome for what we've asked of the machine. Now, if we consider, if we are looking at accredited, tested AI systems which are certified and are, and the risks are identified, that should be part of our decision-making process. Now, I personally believe that we should have a tested, accredited AI systems, because it's a bit like having a company that works for you in oil and gas. You would look for them to be ISO 9001, 14001, because then you know what you're getting. It's a known quantity. And I think at this stage of the rollout and evolution of AI, it's absolutely fundamental. We know what we're getting and we know where the risks are to better inform us. Because one of the big things about decision making is AI actually gives us more time to make critical decisions. And people forget that when making a decision, that time is the most important ingredient in their whole process.
Right. I mean, one thing is you mentioned human oversight, right? That still there's a certain human element in the loop. However, the more autonomous we become, or these systems become, the less obviously humans will be in the loop. So that's one aspect to it. And the other one is what you mentioned. Well, you need to trust these AI systems more and more, right? The quality plays an important role, and we will see a lot of AI tools, a very complex landscape of different AI tools basically being integrated into organizations, and one needs to ensure that basically every tool meets a certain quality requirements.
I was really blown away yesterday by the number of people who talked about how we can improve the financial position of the industry, the safety position, the operational performance, the output, and how AI will have an influence across all of these areas of the industry. And not just oil and gas, but across the whole upstream, downstream provision.
That was very interesting to hear how AI is penetrating the upstream sector, but also downstream, also upstream, the drilling, right? Optimizing where to drill, how to drill, from planning to operations. So in every aspect of that, AI plays a certain role. It was really interesting to see, okay, notwithstanding that we start typically from first principles and then we use AI to optimize systems, right? And downstream, that more and more AI tools are being used in developing, new products. And I think there also, what I heard yesterday, the region wants to play not only, let's say, the oil and gas role, but also coming up with new downstream products, right? So that's another actually interesting development. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yesterday we had the two lady presenters, one after the other. One started with talking about how AI is being employed in seismic exploration, and then the next day was talking about field development. Now, these are two really early stages in the exploitation and extraction of oil and gas. And what I thought was particularly pertinent was when they turned around and said about how much quicker they can process into a higher level of quality, and therefore their situational awareness of what is actually underground or underwater was so much better, and therefore the efficiency and by definition the safety of the extraction process is that much more pronounced. So I was very heartened then. But as you say, if we go further downstream, the use of AI and how we can then use the byproducts of oil and gas to the betterment of our ever-hungry society, I thought was really pertinent as well. And I came away from that thinking that we have already passed the watershed moment with AI in oil and gas. There can be no going back. It's a bit like when we introduced digitalization a decade ago, or we went, through various stages of the Industrial Revolution. Once you've gone past a certain point, you cannot go back. And we're there with AI. And I think the thing that really struck me yesterday was that slide that showed the number of people who within 3 months of ChatGPT coming out were subscribed. It was the fastest technical rollout in history. Better than Netflix, better than Google Translate, better than TikTok. And now everybody wants AI. But we have a sense of responsibility in its use. Just because people want something doesn't necessarily mean to say they're qualified to use it. And really, it's like children in a sweet shop. You've got to measure the process. Otherwise, the result can be not what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that goes hand in hand with then a proper governance, right? I mean, we talk a lot about AI governance. I mean, governance generally is in place in the oil and gas sector regarding this risk exposure, right? Obviously, and now this needs to be translated to AI specific governance, so that you really then have trustworthy AI you can leverage, right?
So, I mean, oil and gas is one of the most regulated industries in the world. And, relatively, the major incidents that we talk about that have changed the way that we operate have been very rare. It's not an everyday occurrence, and that is because of the level of regulation. There is international regulation, there's national regulation, there's company regulation, and that it is a regulated industry. So therefore, I would assume and anticipate that it would welcome regulated use of AI.
I mean, we see also that, besides the European Union with their big AI Act approach, right, but also other countries, China is doing a lot in the regulatory space, US even, right, specific US states. We also see now here in this region that those activities, these regulatory activities, are observed very closely, and probably they take a more pragmatic approach. What makes sense, or do you see that they may want to play their own role? That they have a specific approach to this regulatory aspect. What do you think?
I think again, there's going to be a bit of a mixture here. The world is waiting to see what is the impact of US, Chinese, and EU-wide regulation on AI. It would be, I think, wrong to say that everybody is going to adopt all of these regulations without considering their own standpoint and their own interest. But I think that we also have to be aware that when countries do establish rules and regulations for AI, that AI is constantly evolving, and those regulations are not going to be like the 10 Commandments that are carved in stone. They are going to have to change and evolve as our use of AI and the systems that we use in AI evolve and advance. It's just like when we first started to drive motor cars. There were sets of regulations that were put in place in 1905. Traffic lights were established, 110 years ago. But look at how we drive now. It's very different than how we drove 110 years ago. And the rules and regulations surrounding car use in Germany or UK or America have evolved as the technology in the car industry has evolved. And I would see a very similar role for the regulations surrounding AI. That what I also think is important is that people like the EU, the US and China don't do this in stovepipes. That we start to encourage a global conversation about what we want from AI and how it's going to need to be regulated for the betterment of humanity, not the detriment. And we're definitely going to get into a global conversation about it, because if 20% of the world is covered by Chinese regulation, 35% of the world's economy is governed by American regulation, same for the EU, there are big influences there on why we need to listen to the players, the big players. But a bit like climate change, we also need to listen to the smaller countries as well, because everybody has a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in this context, it's important to see what the common denominator is, the commonalities, and not the differences. We are very often jumping into the differences and the potential issues, but ultimately there is a lot in common, right? We want to protect humans, we want to protect the environment. So there's a lot actually. We look in a very similar manner, and maybe just to bridge also or connect this to the topic of standards and standardization, because ultimately regulation typically stipulates high-level requirements, but then how to substantiate those requirements, right? And that's why how the standards come into the picture. And fair to say that obviously in these international standardization committees, a lot of different personalities, experts from different organizations, different countries, different regions agree basically on something, whether it's a technical data quality standard or it is an ethical aspect of AI systems, right? I think there is an opportunity really to bring these different, slightly different approaches actually also together. And in the Middle East, how far I see this is that they closely observe what's going on, but ultimately also have their own standpoint. And what you mentioned, let's not implement a huge, let's say, regulatory framework, not knowing how this technological wave now unfolds, right? So I guess there are already some safeguards in place, and as we go along with this adoption and development, we also then have to adjust and augment the regulation, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a question of, let's face it, we need to observe what's going on, orientate ourselves, make a decision, and then relook. And just keep the process to be iterative, very circular, so that we can evolve the regulations as quickly as we need to be as effective as we need to be.
Yeah. It was also coming also to an end, but was yesterday also interesting in this conversation about AI, the impact, the risk, and these aspects. What I've not heard anymore, that's I think good news, is that AI is taking over humanity. It's getting too powerful. I think it's more about understanding the limitations of this system, and it turns out that there's significant limitations. Obviously, that's why we focus on very concrete applications, and focus more on practical benefits and outcomes rather than on the big story of the Terminator coming around the corner next year. I think it's a very practical and realistic conversation, which I think also helps to bring this technology then really up to speed, because, and I think this was also one of the conclusions yesterday I would draw, we cannot continue as we are doing, right? I mean, one thing is always to question and raise the risks of new technologies and the potential downside of these technologies. But the other point is, I think we also can't continue as we do, right? With all the issues like climate changes and so on, right? So there is the only option ultimately we have to further develop, and part of this development is technology, and AI is now the big technology of the decade, right?
Yeah, but that development has to be regulated and directed so that it is very much the betterment of humanity. And I think I like your analogy there with the sort of Terminator, that there's far too much skepticism about science fiction. AI is just another piece of really valuable technology that we have developed that can be a very powerful tool to make this world a better place.
Yeah.